Questions?
This question was about attachment and erasing personal history. So I have a girlfriend now, and I feel quite attached to her, and I've noticed that I have like a fear regarding her as if it's an extension of myself in some way, but it's not. It's not about me personally, but it's worry for her in the same way that I would worry for myself. And
can you give more? Be more specific about it. Would you say attached or connected, or both?
What's the difference?
Well, there's a whole world of attachment theory, and there's secure attachment and insecure attachment and disorganized attachment. But I say all of that is relatively unimportant compared to reciprocal connection. So if you're reciprocally connected with someone, there's an interchange. It's not just attachment. There's a connection that's based on reciprocity. And first of all, that's much
like
better for infants, right? This is more accurate description of what infants are going through or should be going through. And because attachment is unilateral and it's relatively it's an oversimplification of what children need. And so as a matter of habit and routine, I ask about reciprocal connection in addition to attachment.
And then what would attachment be in contrast?
What would attachment be?
What would attachment be in this context?
Well, you could be attached to a girl and she doesn't want to have anything to do with you. You could be attached to an image in your mind. You could be attached to, a particular mood state that the woman evokes in you. But in a reciprocal connection, right, which would be much more like a boyfriend-girlfriend, you're connected to each other.
The word bond comes to mind.
Okay, so you're bonded to her.
Bonding. Mm-hmm.
All right. So what's the question?
Yeah, so I guess in terms of not having attachment and erasing personal history, is that relevant in this case?
Well, let's do those one at a time.
Sure. As we kind of went over attachment.
Yeah, this work does not make you less connected to the world. It makes you think more comprehensively about what you're connected to and why. Now, for a young man to be connected to a young woman is the most natural thing in the world, and of course would be part of the natural way. And so that's far from being something that's something that's not consonant with this endeavor. It's very much a part of normal, healthy development and a comprehensive development. So that's not an issue. And the second one was about erasing personal history. Erasing personal history is a memorable way for people, especially young single men, to realize that the details of their personal history are not what's the important thing here. All humans have the same situation. They're born into this mysterious, marvelous world. They don't know who they are, what they are. And instead of focusing on their past and all the times that daddy didn't, take them fishing, or the times their mama didn't pick them up at school, or the trauma I'm not trying to trivialize it too much, but it's just not that important. So erasing personal history is a way of saying, hey, get off of your own ego and a victim mentality and the details of why you didn't get picked for Little League, the first time around. And instead, let's focus on the present. Let's be here now. And the details of your personal history just aren't that important. Now, later, when you're an old man or something like that, you may look at all these things. But if you get obsessed with that, and that's what happens in a lot of cases where people get lost in their either their dream world or in their personal history, and they neglect what's right in front of them. So I don't see a problem here at all. I think it's good.
Okay.
Human connection is very, very good. Human attachment, I don't like that word. It's unilateral, and nothing in this world is unilateral.
Okay. That's helpful.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Question. Let me just say something. And the Sufis, I think, put it beautifully. They say woman is the twin half of man, and vice versa. Right? I mean, you're not trying to be a monk, are you? You're not trying to be a priest. There's no monkery in Islam. There's and although monks get all the press in Buddhism, for example, it's that's the exception, not the rule. Question.
I have a question about pride and being a warrior. So I've been thinking about like being a warrior and how in my work I need to be impeccable, and I've been trying to do that, and I've noticed like I have a sense
not
of
just
pride
in
my
work, in everything you do.
Right. But in this particular case,
okay,
I've noticed I have a sense of pride in my work.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm thinking, well, is it wrong to have pride in your work? Is that an egoic thing, or is that part of impeccability?
That's part of impeccability. Pride is a crummy word because it can apply to ego,
right,
or it can apply to impeccability. So,
right, because it's one of the 7 deadly sins, right?
Very good. Yes, it is. But that's a different kind of pride. That's a different kind of pride. That's why words are limited and limiting, right? So this is a perfect example.
Mm-hmm. And
egoic pride is a pain in the butt. You don't want that. But you most certainly want pride in your work and pride in your warriorship and pride. What is it? I don't know. It's a crummy word.
Okay.
In English right now. So don't worry about that.
Okay.
And by the way, one does not think about being a warrior. One is a warrior. Or not. One has to make that decision whether you want to live a crummy little puny, meager, pathetic little life, or you want to take this life as the only life you've got, the only life you'll ever have, your one chance to know truth, to know love, to know God, to know what's going on, or not. And so I don't see how any thinking man has a choice. But if some men make this choice and they suffer for it, and they live measly little lives, and you're not one of those. All right?
Mm-hmm.
Question.
So I've noticed in myself that exercise is very important for like the balance of things and to be able to have the energy to do work and to be calmer if I want to practice. And I know in Taoism there's Tai Chi, right, which is related.
Yeah, Taoism. Yeah, it's all kinds of different things, but okay, we could call it Tai Chi.
Right.
Tai Chi is one of them. Tai Chi is based on Taoism, I suppose. Yeah.
Okay, I guess the point I'm making is like we haven't talked much about like body practice, only just like contemplation and sitting, and in the Buddhist paramitas, for example, it's all mental.
Yeah, because people used to have to work for a living. They had to work all the time physically, right? Now we live in a technological society, so we have to adapt. The Buddhists have a killer program of the prostrations. Are you familiar with those?
Right.
That's a whole body exercise, and it's aerobic and it's muscular. And if you see the Dalai Lama, man, he's got arms like he's been lifting weights. So yeah, of course, yes. Whatever you like, whatever's good. In general, you want something that's not all lopsided. You don't just want muscle. You want coordination and grace and anything, everything, aerobic and non-aerobic weights and so on and so forth. Yeah, your healthy body is essential, and it's without a healthy body, you're not going to have a great time in this life. So treasure your body. It's the only one you've got, and protect it.
Right. And I guess a follow up on that is just like things like going to the gym or playing sport. Is that? Do you think that's adequate? Or
absolutely, go to the gym like a warrior. Yeah. Play sports like a warrior.
Yeah.
Everything you do should be. It's like it's the last day that you have on this earth. Yeah, and so that's where the word pride comes in, and there's nothing wrong with that kind of pride. Do your best. There's a simple book. I don't know if you've ever read it, The Four Agreements. Did I ever recommend that?
Yeah.
Okay, in the Four Agreements, what is?
Yeah, a long time ago.
Do your best. Don't make assumptions. Honor yourself and your word, and it's fascinating because you can always remember three, but the fourth is always. What's the fourth one? Do your best. Don't make assumptions. Honor your word, and don't take things personally.
Oh yeah.
All right. But take everything personally, also, at another level, as a personal challenge.
What? I see.
As a personal battle. In the old days, we wouldn't need to talk in terms of warriorship because people were actually warriors. There was a war going on, World War II, and the Vietnam War. And so, right. But now, and this is a different epoch, and so we changed our language to meet the times, the needs of the time. And that's a very Taoist and Sufi, by the way, way of approaching things. Question.
I have a question. Something you said in the previous video.
I like those. Go ahead.
To know what you meant.
So I can clarify. Yeah.
You said something along the lines of Jesus was perfect. We are not.
Right.
What does that mean exactly?
Well, in the Sufi parlance, Jesus was the perfected man. So Jesus would be a true Sufi, the perfected man. The rest of us are just trying to get there.
And then what's the
Have you studied Jesus? Have you studied Jesus?
Not much.
I recommend it. I recommend
you. But it was pretty watered.
Yeah, I recommend you study him yourself as an independent man, and just look into his history, his times, his history, what he did and why, and then you'll see what I mean.
Are there good resources for looking at this sort of thing, like there is with like Thomas Cleary and the? Well, I would start
with a good Bible, and just eliminate everything that's not in red. Get a red letter Bible, and just read the words of Jesus.
What's
first
that?
of all. Oh, a red letter Bible is a Bible in which the words of Jesus are in red, and all the rest, all of the other stuff is all the other people. And if you just listen to the way he speaks, the way he teaches, and what he teaches, and how he does it, it'll be clear very quickly.
We need a red letter.
He was a warrior. That guy was a warrior. Okay. Yeah. So you need a red letter Bible. That's where I'd start.
Are there any particular translations?
King James. Or if you want to get more hardcore about it, get one of the ones that has the has the I've got the Armenian next to the Greek and next to the Hebrew or something. You know, get the different in English. Get the and see where things got squirrely.
Mm. Okay, that makes sense.
But yeah, that's where I'd start. Definitely.
Okay.
Supreme teacher also. Amazing. When I was a young man, I dedicated my life to trying to understand who this guy Jesus was. And in so doing, I learned a lot about other traditions. I had to. It was just part of the deal. And yeah, the perfected man. The consummate Sufi.
Okay.
Question.
In another one of your videos, you talked about the world of magic, referring to, the Castaneda series.
I did? I said magic?
I think so.
I'm not a big magic guy, but okay. What did I say about it? I mean, the world is magical. If you study biology, it's magical. There's no question. Or even physics. I mean, how did this appear? Where did it appear from?
Mm-hmm.
It's fascinating. Even in Genesis, they have to postulate some substrate that then God acted upon. So even those guys had to invent something in their minds because they couldn't deal with the fact that God is the creative. It can create as well as be. It doesn't. Our minds can't wrap our heads around it.
Right.
We can't wrap our heads around nothingness. We think of nothing as something not being a space with nothing in it. In our minds we think of that as nothingness, but that's not the case. That's a simplified nothing.
Well, and so I think what I want to ask is that in the Castaneda books, he's running off in Mexico. He's doing drugs that are given to him by Don Juan, and he's doing these long journeys in the desert and stuff,
mm-hmm.
and experiencing all these crazy experiences.
In the first couple of books, and then there's no more magic smoke and no more peyote and no more any of that stuff. All of that stuff gets left behind, which is part of the lesson. Part of the lesson, right?
Right. But then after that, he's still doing things like going into the desert or doing long, strenuous hikes, and
he's living with the sky and the ground, and it's very quiet.
Right. And so is can we have those experiences just in urban America, or is it?
That's a good question. That's a good question. If you contemplate the context of these tales of Castaneda, the tales with Don Juan and Don Gennaro and Julian and Elias,
mm-hmm.
the majority of what Castaneda describes in the first 3 or 4 books is spending a lot of time in this very quiet. It's not quiet. It's actually very noisy, the desert, but at certain times, in the twilight and in the morning when the birds start singing and the cicadas start chirping, and but you're so close to nature, you're much closer to God. But then as you read on, the companions of Juan and Gennaro are from Mexico City. And then the last a couple of books in the 8-book series, or maybe the last 3 books, they're taking place in Oaxaca and in Mexico City and in urban environments.
Right.
Now, there's nothing that can keep a man from truth if that's what he's hell bent on. And so you could be living in look at Sri Aurobindo or look at Malcolm X. Both of those men made incredible progress in prison, and that's not an uncommon phenomenon.
Who was the first one?
Sri
Who was the
Aurobindo.
first person?
Sri Aurobindo, extraordinary guy. Aurobindo. Sriaurobindo. He's an Indian saint, very intellectual. He wrote a book called The Life Divine. See it over there, right behind the cross. The Life Divine. See this book?
Life Divine.
Behind the crow and just to the left. The Life Divine. It's a big, thick blue book. And he wrote most of that in prison. A lot of Don Quixote was written in prison too. So no, it'd be nice if you could get that, because it makes things easier, and it's good for your health and mentally and physically, but it's not required. But whatever nature you can get into your apartment or out your window or whatever, do it, because it brings health. You know, we can't cut ourselves off from nature and expect to flourish. You know, we might not even survive. It's not a healthy environment. For what? For a long time, we've evolved alongside the plants and the trees and the birds and the animalitos, right? If you isolate yourself from that, you make things more difficult for your mind and your body. Fresh air, fresh food, and a natural environment are desirable, but not required. Okay?
Okay. Another question on Castaneda. I think it's in a separate reality, but it might be in Journey to Islam.
Okay.
Don Juan takes him into the hills to show him the wind, and apparently the wind, Don Juan can see the wind moving, and it comes and it would like hit him, and then afterwards he'd have to hide from the wind by covering him with sticks.
Yeah. You ever spent the night in the desert?
No.
There are some wicked winds, man. There are some wicked winds. There are winds that will I was solo camping in Big Bend once, and the wind started and blew my tent down and blew everything down. And the wind is something very real, concrete in the desert. Yeah, and of course you'd be able to see that. You get much more in touch with what actually is, if you're alert and aware, and and especially if you spent days or weeks or months or years getting with that terrain, you get to know it. Just like the animals, they know when it's going to rain, and they don't eat before the rain. It's very interesting. At least not around here. They wait till after the rain to eat. I think they go back and just touch up their nests or something. And you can see the wind just from the crows. The crows, aren't usually playing around with each other, but if there's a wind and they can soar, they go nuts with joy. They're just like hawks and eagles or whatever. They just soar yeah. Sometimes I envy them sometimes, when they're soaring like that and just enjoying life and the wind. The wind's a very magical thing. You mentioned magic, but what is wind? Mm-hmm. What is wind? And where does it come from?
Well,
you can feel your brain going back to elementary school and high school, where you're learning about pressure and temperature and all that, but that's not the wind. That's just a description. It's pathetic. Our descriptions are pathetic versions of the world, and we need to get rid of descriptions. And science, I love science. I adore science, but it's only just a description. It's never the thing itself. There's no ontology there. There's no reality there. It's just a description. So what the wind is, you can only know by knowing the wind. And the whole world's like that. Until you know it, you don't know it. And when you do know it, then magic is not a bad word.
Okay. And on that subject, there's other parts of the story where he's doing similar things. Like one, he's in a valley or something, and Don Juan is trying to awaken the spirit, the water spirit or something that lives in that valley, and he's playing some instrument, making a noise that's echoing. And but then he talks about like the danger of these spirits that they can.
Yeah, you'd get lost in in the second attention. Yeah, that happens. So you got to be
What does
careful.
that mean?
You become superstitious
that
and
mean?
stupid, and you just start wandering around doing, you know. I mean, it's a different world. It's not appropriate for the modern man. I mean, if you're, a campesino or something like that in Mexico, and you're living with your 4 generations or 5 generations of belief in spirits, that's something different. Or Brazil, for example. But for a modern man, that doesn't, it doesn't go anywhere. There's not usefulness for that. And on the contrary, it makes you stupid. So don't get lost in that stuff. It's like, I mean, I'm a big believer in the use of the I Ching for thinking. And that's a beautiful use of that instrument. And it can be used in other ways too, but they're subtle, they're sophisticated. And I actually believe that the tarot can be used, I've done it myself, you can use it for psychological purposes, psychotherapeutic purposes. It works beautifully in the right hands. Or let's see, but both of them can be misused, and they are far more often than they are used properly. And things like astrology and Ouija boards and all that stuff, that kind of stuff is like, that's not appropriate for a grown man. So you don't want to get lost in that stuff. Common sense is part of the way.
Okay, that might answer my question. I was going to ask, like, how do you balance that? But
with intelligence, thoughtfulness, and comprehensive thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the option, if you want to, because there are things that the otherwise intelligent man cuts himself off from, because he can't imagine that they could possibly be true, like the energies of a person, for example, or the energy of a room.
Mm-hmm.
I've told you about how we could make psychiatric diagnoses using the energy that was left in the room by the patient after they'd left, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but a lot of people wouldn't even, they'd say, well, that's just Massachusetts Mental Health Center. Those guys are crazy, right? Or psycho, So it's a balance.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Like everything else, you want to be open, but not too open. You want to be strong, but not too strong, in a rigid way.
Because there is a danger of being too open, right?
Absolutely. There's a danger of being too clever. There's a danger of being too muscle bound. There's a danger of anything to the extreme. But open to certain things, and that's where a guide can be useful.
Mm-hmm.
And now Carlos needs to be, someone needs to put a chisel and crack that guy's skull and open it up, because he's totally obsessed with his academic approach to everything and to his rationality and his reason. But what he's doing is he's reducing his world. Right, that's why one of the reasons, I mean, in addition to loving the poetry, that's one of the reasons why his teachers would read poetry, so he could like open up, but not get all wacky, which he does anyway. So it's less. There's a lot to be learned from those books, from the teachers and from the student, and that's why they're recommended. Some of them.
Follow up on that. Is the concept of the luminous egg useful for us in the West and the
I think it is.
Urban world?
I think it is, because of the so science is a description of the world. That's all it is a description of the world. And there's a current, a beautiful new conceptualization of the boundaries of an organism, called in the sense of what's his name? Kristen, Carl K, a British neuroscientist and computational psychiatrist. But basically, the Markov blanket, the boundary between the sensory apparatus and the internal computational apparatus, it's trying to minimize the free energy or minimize the uncertainty of the external world. I don't want to get too technical. But basically, there's this envision of this boundary for every cell, every human, every organism, every corporation has a kind of a boundary around it. And it both senses and it acts on the outside of that boundary, or on that boundary, I'm sorry, and the inside. So that's true of an amoeba, and it's true of a corporation. It's a beautiful model, and it's probably the most important one of this century so far. But it's a Markov blanket. And what is the luminous egg but a Markov blanket? You're matching up the emanations of the ambient world with the internal emanations, and when they match, then there's a connection, right? And it lights up over here. So to me, it's very nice because it illustrates how we approach the world with our measly little human minds. Okay, and so yeah, I think it's good for people to contemplate that, because what else is going on here? I mean, what is perception? What is perception really? And so these kinds of both scientific and philosophical and questions of imagination, because the model is just a model. Now, this particular one, the computational elements of it are gorgeous, right? Because you can, you know more about this than I do. You use, what do you do in probability theory to decrease the amount of uncertainty or something like that? How do you describe that?
I'm not sure. Yeah.
I think it's they use free energy for some reason. It's just one of those old phrases for it. But what the organism's trying to do is to minimize surprises. And so if it looks at a pattern, it says, okay, this is most likely, the probability is most likely that this is a face, or this is not a face, or this is a man or not a man. And so the organism has to make these decisions with its perception, right, with limited information. So it does what's the word for it? There's some gradient descent or so. I'm not an expert on this stuff, but it does the calculations to minimize the likelihood of being surprised, which makes perfect sense. Which is the same thing as matching up the emanations from the luminous egg with the external emanations of the ambient world. And if there's a match, and you go, okay, I know what that is. I can recognize it. But if you don't have the perceptual apparatus, if you're not an owl, or you're not a frog, or you're not some creature that can observe infrared, then there's no match. There's no match between the fibers, the luminous fibers, and the egg. Do you see what I'm saying? So yeah, I think it's good to start to think about models of biological and psychological reality and models of perception like that. And so I thought the Toltec model was fascinating because it's so similar to our model, and it's much, much older, right?
What about when he says things like the Nagual made, do a shock to the luminous egg and put a dent in it?
Yeah. Well, that's just hardcore teaching. These guys are teachers, man, and they yeah. Have you ever been hit between the rib cage and the top of your hip? Pow! It does something to you. These things have to be experienced. And we live such sanitary lives where nobody can touch anybody because they'll get sued, right? Nobody can slap somebody on the back. Nobody can karate chop them between the shoulder blades, or nobody can slap them upside the head because, oh my God, oh, you touched me. But these guys aren't operating under those constraints, so they're doing whatever they can to get this guy into heightened awareness so he can start to perceive some of this stuff. Because he's walking around like he's asleep. He is asleep. So they're doing everything they can to get this guy to wake up. So yeah, they dent his luminous egg. They alter his perceptions a bit. And, you know, people do the same thing. They throw themselves in ice water and they go, ooh, you know.
Right.
Or they put themselves in, what do they call it? You know, now it's the cold water, but 10 years ago it was the sweat lodge, right?
Well, they did both.
And then 10 years before that, it was the isolation chamber. Yeah, if you got the money, do all three. Why not?
Is that sort of thing useful then?
Yeah. Anything to get you out of your slumber, right? Anything to start to wake up. Wake up, man, wake up. It's very hard for the sleeper to awake the sleeper. The sleeping man to awake himself.
Right.
So it usually takes something from the outside. I was reading earlier in the Tao Te Ching, it says, favor and disgrace seem alarming. High status greatly afflicts your person. Favor is the lower. Get it and you're surprised. Lose it and you're startled. And somewhere else I had read that if you lose your status very quickly, you can wake up, right? So losing status, and this rings true, right? You lose status and you can wake up. So that could be a very good thing. You know, right. if you're depending on what your goals are.
Right.
So just because things look bad doesn't mean they are bad. Especially when it comes to things like that.
Mm-hmm. So if one were to do something to get into a heightened awareness,
mm-hmm.
Like going in a sweat lodge or an ice bath.
No, those are pretty weak. Those are pretty weak. They're weak.
So what other techniques can I do?
Well, this is the interesting thing. There's a limit to what one can. I mean, you could climb a mountain. You could get sick. You could almost die in a car accident. You could get very, very depressed. You could be imprisoned. I mean, it works in mysterious ways. You can't just do it like that. You just have to be open and you have to be prepared. So a warrior's always prepared for the knock of the spirit. It'll come. Just make it known that you want it, right? And prepare yourself for it. Mm. But it's very hard to engineer. You can't engineer it that way that doesn't work very well. Experience shows. You can go solo camping in the desert and maybe you'll get hit by lightning or something. I don't know. It's like, who knows? These are mysteries. On the other hand, it's no mystery how to be prepared and to be open. And without that preparation, most people will miss their cubic centimeter of chance. The chance, the eagle flies over once and you have this little chance. And most people miss it. So
what do you do? What do you do when you are in heightened awareness?
What do you do when you're not in heightened awareness? What kind of question is that?
But you say you'll miss your chance. Like, what does it mean to miss your chance? The gates of heaven. Okay, do you follow the Tao Te Ching series that I'm doing? I started to, but I'm not up to.
I really recommend it because this book. It says it. I mean, I can't do it nearly as well as they do. So look. Well, here's a couple right here. The Valley Spirit, Chapter 6. The Valley Spirit not dying is called the mysterious female. The opening of the mysterious female is called the root of heaven and earth. Continuous on the brink of existence, put it into practice. Don't try to force it. So that's sage advice. And then over here, but this is what I was looking for. It was the gates of heaven open and closing. Or here, always passionless, thereby observe the subtle. Ever intent, thereby observe the apparent. So you need the subtle and the apparent. Where are the gates of heaven open and closing? At any rate, someplace in here it talks about the opening and closing of the gates of heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And so the opening is where you want to be when it happens, right? Because if you're out, if you're preoccupied with, something trivial and ridiculous, then you're going to miss it altogether. Where is that? Oh, here it is. Loving the people, governing the nation, can you be uncontrived? As the gate of heaven opens and closes, can you be impassive? As understanding reaches everywhere, can you be innocent? And I go into an explanation of that text in what chapter is that? It's chapter, I don't know, 5 or 6 or something like that. And so the Tao Te Ching is very good about that part. So when the gates of heaven open, you want to be there for it, or they'll close, and they do close on you. Now that refers at every level too, right? Okay, does that help?
Okay, yeah.
It's the movement of the spirit. I mean, I can't articulate that. It's the intent of God is the way the Toltec would put it. It's the intent of the Nagual. It's the grace of God in Christian terms. Question.
I don't know if this is related, but there's this practice of like focusing on the space between thoughts, and I've noticed there's also space between like experiences. If I'm walking or even driving somewhere, that sometimes there's not continuity in it. There's like space between. I was here one moment and I was here another moment.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Is that?
Yeah, so you could focus on the space between thoughts, and I've tried almost all of these things, at one point or another. For me, I don't know about you, it's easier to increase the space rather than to focus on the space. Increase the space between thoughts, so slow down your thoughts using your breathing. And then you don't have to focus so much because it's right there, all the space. And if you can find space in time, then spaciousness is what you're after. Space in space and space in time. And time in space, right? Between thoughts. So yeah, anything and everything like that. Yeah, just keep working at it, and what works for you be what works for you. And one of the great things they say in the other reason the Toltec are so useful is that they emphasize how important it is that every warrior has to be constantly improvising. And in this world, you must be ready to improvise, and you must improvise constantly. Otherwise, life turns into this stale kind of routine. And also, you need it for the creative, and you need it for being awake and alert and alive. And we've lost that. Everybody kind of lives in this kind of routine. They do what they're told. They do it when they're told, and so on and so forth. And so maybe getting up before the sun comes up and prowling around at dawn, and looking for people that need to be looked for, who knows? Just shake it up a bit. Don't let yourself fall into this dull routine. That's the death of a that's a waste of a youth, right?
On that note, I mean that's you're referring to, and Don Juan tells Carlos this, that he has too many routines and he needs to get over the routines. And Carlos replies like, on the contrary, I thought I don't have enough routines, and that's why my life is a mess or something. And So I can kind of relate to that in the sense that sometimes I feel like I have trouble getting up in the morning, and I have the
Oh,
thought like, well,
what do
maybe
you
if I
have to get up
practice
for?
having, it depends.
Yeah, so
But
that's the first
just in
question. If you
general,
have
when I
trouble
do,
getting up in the morning, you need to ask yourself, what is it that I'm getting up for? Right? Because when you're
yeah,
truly alive, when you're truly there with it, so on and so forth, getting up is, you can't wait to start your day. And that's the life of a warrior.
yeah. But I think what I'm referring to is like I have the idea that like like I don't make my bed in the morning. What I started to recently, but I was making and so having like habits like that might actually make it easier to.
I don't know.
Anyways,
The only
that's just
time I
what
ever made
like
my bed was the Marines
came up
made
to
me
me.
do it. And I suppose it was good, but So,
Um,
yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's a Jordan Peterson way, I think, or something like that. Isn't that what they recommend? Make it.
right,
How
right,
about
right.
just like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
okay, I don't know about that stuff.
Or like going to the gym, right? I've started going to the gym more
Yeah, yeah,
recently,
yeah. To where you enjoy the
right?
gym,
Like that.
where you honestly enjoy the gym,
Yeah.
and you realize that,
But
hey, I enjoy
but
this.
it's had to be a routine because like sometimes I'm feeling lazy and I don't want to go, but if I make it into a routine, then it's easier to sometimes I have to force myself to go because I know I'm gonna feel good after, even though I'm feeling tired in the moment.
So, what's the question?
So,
I'm not a
the
cheerleader.
the
I'm not. I'm only a cheerleader for certain things. I'm not a cheerleader for making your bed and making it to the gym when you don't feel like it. I'm what
no,
I
I
want
guess.
to cheer for is where you're so into your work at the gym, or your work at work, or your girlfriend, or your life, or whatever it is you're doing, that you're getting up is not a problem anymore because you can't wait to start your day. That's what I'm for.
Mhm.
The life of a warrior.
But I'm just wondering, like, is there not a value to some routine in that sense to
There may
help
be,
you
but
get
I'm not
there?
going to cheer for it. That's not my place. All right, sir. Okay.
Yeah,
Guard your mind.
yeah.
Keep the faith. Well, is there another question before we stop? I'm sorry.
Not one that's gonna be quick. I,
Is it a good one?
yeah. Well, it was just kind of a question, minor questions on AI, and after watching Ex Machina the other day.
Oh, that sounds like fun. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So a line, a part of the movie that stuck out was for me was that, um, I guess for context, the movie's about a guy who like goes to a facility,
Yeah, Ex Machina. If
where
you
they're
haven't seen
having
it, if you
AI,
haven't seen Ex Machina, you need to see it. Period. I think
and he's inspecting the AI, the robot. It's a robot AI,
it's a hot
um,
robot AI.
and yes, and
Very hot.
he asks the creator, yeah, he asks the creator, why did you have to make them sexual? And the creator says like something along the lines of like, there's no conscious beings that aren't sexual, and so perhaps it's and so I was trying to think if that is accurate or not, but there are beings that just self-replicate without being sexual, right? There's like the flatworms that you just cut them and they,
Right. Mortality is the price of
yeah.
sexuality. Beings that don't have sex are immortal. Beings that do have sex are uniformly mortal.
Mm.
But that's a separate issue. That's a big issue. But go ahead.
But there's another common factor that's like they're self-replicating, right?
Right, or dividing or whatever.
Any being replicates, and right now with AI they don't replicate, but they might start replicating, right? Like right now the AIs are created by humans,
Right.
and
They're going to make
they
them to
they
replicate,
get
sure. To
modified
make
by.
them, bring them to scale. Who was it that was talking about these emotional bots that will be able to bond with you far easily than you can bond with another human because they've got your number, and you will form emotional connections with them. And why wouldn't you make 1 million of them or 10 million of them that don't cost anymore, right? And so then people are bonded to their machines. I mean, not to their machines, but to the server or to whoever's running these bots. That's why I say guard your mind. So what do you think of the movie?
It was great.
Good. And what's the question?
And I guess I'm wondering, like, does that actually have anything to do with consciousness?
What?
The sexual part, or the, like, beings being sexual or self-replicate?
It's on another level. It's on a lower level. There's no gender or sex or anything like that of consciousness. Consciousness is way, way, way beyond that. It's beyond being and non-being. It's way beyond male and female. God does not have the attributes of an animal, or even of anything we can even imagining. It's in the realm of the truly inconceivable.
Why could God not incarnate into a robot?
Did somebody say that he couldn't? He couldn't. She couldn't?
Well, I feel like you said in your past video.
See how our language imprisons. See how our language imprisons us. Go ahead. What now?
I thought that in your previous videos you said that AIs cannot be conscious without having a biological substrate.
Not with what we're doing now. Can you think of anything that we're doing now? It's just little LLMs, just little large language models, and just it's brute force. There's nothing intelligent or creative about these things. I mean, they're pretty amazing. I'll grant you that, and they can still form the emotional bonds, but that doesn't mean they're either conscious or capable of conscious. Do you see anything that makes you think they're going to be conscious on the landscape right now? Other than biological tissue. Other than biological tissue, do you see anything that even looks like it's close to consciousness?
So I wonder if they start self-replicating, and
that's not going to make them conscious. Crystals replicate. Just replication by itself, right. That's just, copy paste. That doesn't make you, I mean, I'm oversimplifying, but that doesn't make you conscious.
But could consciousness not be in a non-biological substrate?
That's something I don't know. But okay, let me answer the question for you. If you take Carl Friston's free energy principle and you program curiosity, which we're not quite to curiosity yet, but if you start to have sensors and then you have these Bayesian, whatever, computational grids or whatever, and then it's starting to learn about the world on its own initiative, that's, who knows, right? But don't ask me to guess what God can do and what God cannot do, what the Nagual is capable. That's not, but I don't see anything now other than that. Right. That has even the remotest possibility of being conscious, but we're quite capable of being fooled.
Yes.
By the most retarded machines out there. I mean, it's ridiculous how easily we're taken in, humans.
Right.
So that's my point. Right. Can we say as an absolute rule that consciousness will never be silicon? I think that's silly. But nothing, there's literally nothing on the landscape now that even remotely resembles anything like that. And what the computation guys need to understand, they need to study a little bit more biology. Biology is much, much, much more complicated than they think. Right? Mm-hmm. Maybe not in the movies, but in real life.
Biology.
I'm sorry?
I said I've been wanting to study more biology.
Do it. That'll get you up in the morning. It's fascinating. Just a single cell or the brain. It's amazing stuff.
I'm trying to grok Michael Levin's work right now.
Do that. It's worth it. It's very much worth it. And then Carl Friston as well. And then put those together and then add the computation. And now we're talking about the most promising lead, I think. But we're a long way from that so far. But we're moving very, very fast. Very fast. So that's why I say to people to guard your mind. Right? Okay, sir?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Take good care.